Welcome back to the channel. Everyone, before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because today's story is one that will pull you behind the velvet rope into the very heart of a dispute that has shaken one of the most beloved charities connected to the royal family. What happens when passion, legacy, and personalities collide, and a charity once praised for its life-saving work becomes embroiled in public scandal? That is the story of Sentebale, the charity founded 19 years ago by Prince Harry and Prince Cecil of Lesotho. A noble endeavor, born from grief and empathy. Its mission was to help young people living with HIV and AIDS, to give hope to those who had previously been left to fend for themselves. Over the years, Sentebale grew into a symbol of compassion, attracting global attention, respect, and support. It was, in many ways, a beacon of what could be achieved when empathy met action. And yet, even the brightest lights can cast shadows. What began as a shared vision for young people in Lesotho has, in recent months, become a story of conflict, public statements, and bruised reputations. The Charity Commission, tasked with regulating and overseeing charitable organizations in the UK, stepped in to adjudicate, attempting to untangle what had fundamentally gone wrong at the heart of Sentebale. But what did they find? And more importantly, has the saga truly come to an end? The Charity Commission's role was simple, at least in theory. They were meant to examine the breakdown in relationships between the chair, the patrons, and the trustees, essentially, the very people charged with steering the organization toward its mission. What went wrong? Where did communication fail? And, critically, how had this conflict played out so publicly, threatening the reputation and integrity of charity that had once been a model of transparency and purpose? In the end, the Commission handed down what can only be described as a mixed verdict. No outright winner emerged. Instead, both sides received a pointed warning for letting the dispute spill into public view through interviews, statements, and media coverage, including the highly publicized Sky News interview with Ms. Shandaka. According to the report, this public airing of grievances had severely impacted Sentebale's reputation and risked undermining public trust in charities more generally. Yet, even in this public chastisement, there were glimmers of vindication. For Prince Harry, the Commission found no evidence to support allegations of racism or misogyny, a relief, perhaps, but one tempered by the fact that the report left him feeling devastated and portrayed the situation as nothing short of a hostile takeover. For Ms. Shandaka, who remained chair of the charity despite the controversy, the regulatory response allowed her to continue in her role. Both sides, then, were left to reflect on what might be called partial victories. But the deeper truth is that criticism, especially when public and scathing, leaves scars that don't fade easily. Sources close to Harry describe a sense of betrayal, a feeling that the charity he co-founded, a charity built from his heart, had been caught up in point scoring and political maneuvering, rather than remaining true to its mission. Former trustees, meanwhile, voiced grave concern for the charity's future, fearing that the wounds inflicted by this dispute might take years to heal. What is striking, when you step back, is how human this story truly is. At the core of Sentebale is a mission that transcends politics, egos, and public perception. It is about young people facing challenges that many of us can scarcely imagine, living with the shadow of HIV and AIDS in communities often overlooked by the global spotlight. The charity was meant to be a lifeline, a bridge between despair and hope. And yet, in the midst of these conflicts, that purpose almost became secondary. The Charity Commission acknowledged this complexity. While it cleared Harry of any allegations of wrongdoing, it recognized a strong perception of ill treatment experienced by multiple parties involved in the dispute. It highlighted the personal impact the conflict had on those closest to the organization, painting a picture of a charity fractured not by mission, but by mistrust, miscommunication, and clashing personalities. It's easy to get lost in the headlines, the statements, the interviews, the press coverage, but at its core, this story is about passion and its consequences. Sentebale was not just another charity. It was, and remains, a deeply personal project for Harry. Founded in honor of his mother, Princess Diana, and designed to support vulnerable youth in Lesotho, the charity represented a marriage of heart and purpose. To see that legacy challenged so publicly is a reminder of how delicate the stewardship of any organization can be, especially when the personalities involved are larger than life. Now, Sentebale is operating under a regulatory action plan. This means that the Charity Commission will continue to monitor the organization closely, and further intervention will follow if the plan is not implemented. For Harry, this is undoubtedly a difficult reality. His priorities remain clear: supporting the young people of Lesotho and Botswana, providing HIV and AIDS assistance, and promoting mental health initiatives. But he must now do so from a distance, as the charity moves forward without his day-to-day involvement. And yet, even in the midst of scrutiny and regulation, there are lessons to be drawn. The Charity Commission's report serves as a mirror, not only reflecting the missteps of those involved, but also highlighting the importance of transparency, communication, and the human dimension in charity work. Even the most noble causes are vulnerable when interpersonal conflicts overshadow purpose. What is haunting about this story is the tension between intent and perception. Harry's intentions were clear: to create a charity that could make a meaningful difference. Ms. Shandaka's role as chair was equally vital, guiding organizational strategy and governance. But when disputes went public, when statements and interviews became weapons, the line between mission and ego blurred. Both sides may have been acting in what they believed were the charity's best interests, yet the outcome was public scrutiny, reputational damage, and personal distress. And this is where the story becomes truly human. Passion, pride, and purpose collided in ways that few outside the organization could fully understand. From the outside, it is easy to cast judgment or assign blame. But inside Sentebale, every decision, every statement, every choice carried weight. Every public comment had ramifications for the young people the charity exists to serve. As the dust settles, Harry and his team must reflect on what Sentebale once was: a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of empathy and action, and how it continues to be a vital institution, even as the structure and leadership evolve. The young people in Lesotho and Botswana remain at the center of the story, and their needs continue to guide the mission, regardless of who occupies what title or sits on which board. The narrative continued with whispers of disillusionment among the very people who had once believed in Sentebale's mission as something almost untouchable, a shining beacon of compassion carved out of Harry's grief and love for his late mother. Yet, as the dust settled from the Commission's report, one could not help but feel that the lingering bitterness was like smoke after a house fire. The walls may still stand, but the smell of ruin clings to everything. This was not simply a case of bad governance or poor communication. It was a deeper wound, one that revealed just how fragile even the noblest of causes could become when human pride, mistrust, and ambition weave their way into the fabric of leadership. For Harry, there was a painful irony. He had once stood before cheering crowds in Lesotho and Botswana, carrying the hope of a generation on his shoulders, reminding the world of children who had been abandoned to the cruel tide of AIDS. Now, those same shoulders seemed weighed down by accusations, public disputes, and an institution he could no longer call his own. What must it feel like to watch something you built out of love turn into a battleground? Was it betrayal? Was it failure? Or was it, perhaps, just the inevitable unraveling of a vision left unguarded? Those closest to Harry painted him as devastated, as though the Commission's report was less a verdict and more a requiem for what once was. Words like hostile takeover echoed in the media, stirring images of corporate boardrooms rather than charity halls in Lesotho, where children once found food, comfort, and dignity. And maybe that is where the tragedy lies, when an organization meant to serve the most vulnerable becomes consumed by the struggles of the powerful. The trustees, for their part, insist they remain gravely concerned about the charity's future, suggesting that Harry's exit is not the end of the conflict, but merely another chapter. And yet, amid the ashes, flickers of victory can still be seen. For Harry, being cleared of allegations of racism and misogyny was no small matter. In a world where reputations can be destroyed in a single headline, that finding alone preserved his ability to continue speaking on the global stage about the issues closest to his heart. For Ms. Shandaka, the chair who found herself at the center of this storm, retaining her position meant a validation of her leadership, however tarnished the journey may have been. But these victories were not without cost, for each carried the weight of public distrust and the scars of very public battles. One must ask, can a charity ever truly recover from such a public implosion? Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired, The commission may have put Sentebale under a regulatory action plan, demanding strict adherence to governance and transparency, but regulations alone cannot heal fractured relationships or restore lost faith. The children of Lesotho and Botswana, who once knew Sentebale as a lifeline, may never know the politics that fracture its core, but they will feel its consequences if the mission falters. To understand the magnitude of what is at stake, one must remember how Sentebale began. Two young men, Prince Harry and Prince Cecil of Lesotho, brought together not by privilege but by grief. Both had lost their mothers, and out of that shared pain they vowed to build something that would honor their memory and heal the wounds of others. In 2006, at its founding, Sentebale was more than charity. It was a story, a living symbol that grief could be transformed into hope. And for nearly 2 decades, that story inspired thousands, drawing support from celebrities, global donors, and ordinary people moved by its cause. To see it now, caught in the grip of regulatory oversight, is to feel the sting of watching a dream decay before your eyes. Still, even as one chapter closes, another may be beginning. Harry is said to remain deeply committed to the cause of young people battling HIV and AIDS, as well as the silent struggles of mental health. If he cannot carry the Sentebale banner, perhaps he will build something new, leaner and more resistant to the politics that corrode even the worthiest of missions. The question is not whether Harry still cares. By all accounts, he does. The question is whether the world will still listen to him, whether supporters burned by the spectacle of infighting will trust him to lead again. And perhaps that is the haunting lesson of Sentebale. Charities, like people, are built not only on passion but on trust. When that trust is eroded, all the passion in the world cannot fill the void. The Commission's findings did not name a single villain. Instead, it cast a shadow over everyone involved, condemning both sides for allowing their personal grievances to overshadow the purpose of the charity itself. And isn't that the tragedy? That in fighting for control, they risked losing sight of the very children the charity was meant to protect? Imagine for a moment the children of Lesotho, who once saw the name Sentebale as a promise. To them, it meant food where there was hunger, medicine where there was pain, education where there was despair. They do not care who sits on the board, or who gives the interviews, or who claims victory in a media war. What they care about is survival. And yet, their survival now hangs on the fragile thread of an organization that must rebuild its reputation from the ground up. The Charity Commission has spoken, but its report reads less like a conclusion and more like a warning. Sentebale must now operate under strict oversight. Watch closely for any signs of relapse into dysfunction. Should it fail to follow the plan, further action will be taken. For supporters, this raises a chilling question. Is the charity's mission sustainable, or is it already too far gone? As for Harry, the man who once strode across Lesotho's hills with determination in his eyes, he must now reckon with a painful truth that the story began 19 years ago is no longer his to finish. Yet perhaps, in the quiet of reflection, he will remember why he began it all. The young people of Lesotho and Botswana, the fight against HIV and AIDS, the need to transform pain into purpose. And maybe, just maybe, he will find a new way forward. Because at the heart of this story lies a universal truth. Institutions rise and fall, names are tarnished and restored, but human need remains constant. Children will still need care. Communities will still need healing. The question is who will step forward now, and whether those who once carried the torch of Sentebale can ever truly reclaim its light. So, has a line really been drawn under the Sentebale saga? Or is this merely an intermission, with more battles yet to come? Perhaps the greater question is not about Harry, Shandaka, or the trustees, but about us, the public. Can we look past the scandals and remember the cause? Can we hold leaders accountable without abandoning the vulnerable they were meant to serve? The story of Sentebale is not just a royal scandal. It is a cautionary tale about pride, power, and the fragile nature of trust. It is a reminder that even the most inspiring missions can crumble when egos clash, and that no legacy, however noble, is immune to human weakness. And so we'll leave you with this haunting thought. If even a charity born from grief and love can collapse under the weight of conflict, what does that say about the causes we hold dear today? Which of them will endure, and which will falter when tested? Perhaps the answer lies not in princes or patrons, but in ordinary people, people like us, who refuse to let the mission die. And so we'll leave you with this haunting thought. If even a charity born from grief and love can collapse under the weight of conflict, what does that say about the causes we hold dear today? Which of them will endure, and which will falter when tested? Perhaps the answer lies not in princes or patrons, but in ordinary people, people like us, who refuse to let the mission die.